My beloved child. Stop scrolling for just a moment. There is a reason your eyes stopped here instead of moving on. Something has been quietly unfolding beyond what you can see, and what you are about to hear carries the feeling of a story that was meant to find you at exactly this moment. Do not rush through these words. Let them settle into your heart one sentence at a time, because this is a fictional message told through the voice of heaven, woven to awaken hope, courage, and wonder. Somewhere, a soul has been carrying thoughts too heavy to hide any longer, and something unexpected has just happened that changed everything. You have been wondering why certain emotions have appeared without warning. Why your heart has felt unusually restless. Why moments of peace have been interrupted by memories that seem to arrive from nowhere. You believed they were random. You believed they would fade if you ignored them. But stories often begin long before anyone realizes they have already stepped into them. Tonight is not about fear. It is not about panic. It is about a turning point that no one expected, especially the one whose heart has been quietly calling your name. Pause here for another heartbeat. Listen closely. Imagine that heaven is opening a single window for just a few moments. Through that window you cannot see every answer, but you can sense movement. You can feel that pieces which once seemed scattered are beginning to shift into a pattern. That pattern has everything to do with a conversation that has not yet happened, but desperately wants to. There is someone who has rehearsed your name more times than you could ever count. Not because they enjoy living in memories, but because every attempt to move forward somehow circles back to you. They have smiled while hiding questions. They have laughed while carrying silence. They have convinced others that everything was fine even when their heart whispered otherwise. They tried to replace uncertainty with distractions, yet every distraction quietly dissolved until they were left standing face to face with the truth they had avoided. Something happened today. Not something loud enough for the whole world to notice. Not something that made headlines. Not something dramatic enough for strangers to stop and stare. But something powerful enough to change the direction of a single heart. And sometimes that is where the greatest stories begin. They saw something they were never expecting to see. It was not necessarily a picture. It was not necessarily a message. It was not even a conversation. Sometimes the smallest moment carries the greatest weight. A familiar melody. A passing thought. A quiet reminder. A sentence spoken by someone who had no idea what it would awaken. In an instant, every carefully built wall inside them trembled. For so long they believed silence was strength. Today they discovered silence can become a prison. That realization has been echoing through them ever since. Stay with this story. Do not hurry toward the ending. The most meaningful moments never reveal themselves all at once. Your soulmate has been carrying a conversation inside their heart for longer than anyone realizes. They have started it 1,000 times in their imagination. They have imagined what you might say. They have imagined what you might not say. They have wondered whether too much time has passed or whether the right words still exist somewhere beyond fear. Each imagined conversation ended the same way. With silence. Until today. Today something interrupted that silence. Imagine standing before a mirror and suddenly recognizing a version of yourself you had ignored for years. That is what happened inside them. It was not their reflection they noticed. It was their honesty. It arrived quietly, without permission, asking one simple question they could no longer escape. What if I lose the chance to speak? That question changed everything. Sometimes people believe miracles always appear as extraordinary events. Yet many miracles begin with ordinary courage. A decision. A realization. A willingness to stop pretending everything is fine. That is the miracle quietly unfolding within this story. Not because every answer has arrived, but because denial has finally begun to disappear. There is another detail that almost no one knows. For days, perhaps even longer, they have noticed little reminders that seemed impossible to explain. Familiar places unexpectedly crossing their path. Certain numbers appearing more often than coincidence could comfortably explain. Conversations about love happening around them without invitation. Songs arriving at exactly the right moment. They dismissed every one of them. Until today. Today they stopped dismissing them. Today they allowed themselves to wonder whether every reminder had been preparing them for this exact turning point. Do not skip ahead in your imagination. The next part of this story matters. Because what happened next was even more unexpected. Instead of running from their emotions, they sat quietly with them. That had not happened in a very long time. Without noise. Without excuses. Without distractions. Just honesty. And honesty can become the beginning of extraordinary transformation. As they sat in silence, memories returned, not to trap them in the past, but to remind them of moments they had forgotten to appreciate. Small conversations that once seemed ordinary suddenly became priceless. Tiny acts of kindness they had overlooked became impossible to ignore. Even unfinished sentences carried meaning they had never understood before. It felt as though invisible pieces were reconnecting themselves. Not through force. Not through pressure. But through understanding. There are seasons when hearts become louder than words. This is one of those seasons. You may wonder why this message found you now instead of yesterday. Stories have timing. Seeds have timing. Sunrises have timing. Even hope has timing. Perhaps this fictional message arrived because it reminds you that meaningful conversations should never always be postponed until tomorrow. Meanwhile, your soulmate has reached a place they never expected. Instead of asking whether they still care, they began asking whether they had waited too long to say so. That single question has followed them throughout the entire day. While walking. While working. While resting. While pretending to focus on ordinary responsibilities. It refused to leave. Questions like these do not disappear easily because they come from places deeper than routine thoughts. Somewhere inside them another realization quietly unfolded. They remembered promises they once made to themselves. Promises to become braver. Promises to speak honestly. Promises to stop allowing fear to make decisions. Those promises had gathered dust. Today they found them again. Not in a notebook. Not written on paper. But written across their heart. There was a moment, brief but unforgettable, when everything around them seemed strangely quiet. Even though life continued moving, even though people kept talking and the world carried on as usual, they felt separated from all of it for just a few seconds. Those seconds changed them. They realized that some opportunities are not announced with loud voices. Sometimes they simply arrive. And wait. Waiting patiently for someone to become courageous enough to recognize them. Imagine holding a letter in your hands for months without opening it. Today felt like opening that letter. Only the letter was hidden inside their own heart. Every page carried your memory. Every line carried unfinished feelings. Every blank space carried questions waiting for answers. As each invisible page turned, they understood something they had resisted for far too long. Running away from feelings never truly makes them disappear. It only delays the conversation they eventually demand. That conversation now feels closer than ever. Still, uncertainty remains. Hope and hesitation are walking side by side. One whispers, "Speak." The other whispers, "Wait." The distance between those two voices has become smaller than it has ever been before. This is why today feels different. Not because every problem has vanished. Not because every mystery has been solved. But because movement has finally begun. Hearts rarely change direction all at once. They change one quiet realization at a time. There is another piece of this story you cannot yet fully see. Someone unexpectedly mentioned your name today. Perhaps not in the way anyone would expect. Perhaps not during a dramatic conversation. Just naturally. Casually. Almost accidentally. Yet hearing your name stirred something they believed had settled long ago. It did not bring confusion. It brought clarity. Afterward they smiled. Not because everything suddenly became simple. But because for the first time in a long while they stopped fighting what their own heart had already accepted. Acceptance can be peaceful. Acceptance can also be terrifying. Because once someone accepts the truth, they must eventually decide what to do with it. That decision is approaching. Closer than either of you realize. If you could have seen them in that quiet moment, you would not have recognized the battle happening beneath the surface. Outwardly they appeared calm. Inwardly countless emotions were rising like waves meeting the shore one after another. Hope. Regret. Excitement. Nervousness. Gratitude. Wonder. Each emotion arrived carrying its own story. Together they formed one unforgettable realization. I cannot keep pretending nothing has changed. Those words echoed through them again and again. The day continued. People continued speaking. Responsibilities continued demanding attention. Yet everything felt different. Not because the world had changed. Because they had. Transformation rarely announces itself with thunder. Sometimes it arrives as a whisper impossible to ignore. Somewhere beyond everything visible, this fictional story invites you to remember that every meaningful connection is strengthened not by perfection, but by honesty, patience, and courage. The heart grows brighter whenever fear loses even a little of its power. Tonight, another unexpected event is already beginning. Your soulmate believes they are about to make a choice. They think they understand what comes next. They believe they have finally gathered enough courage. But there is one detail. One astonishing detail. One moment that neither they nor you could possibly anticipate. It has already begun unfolding. They do not even realize it yet. The next few moments will place something directly in front of them, something so unexpected that every carefully prepared plan will suddenly feel incomplete. And when that happens, the very first person they will think about is you. But what they are about to discover next may change the entire direction of this story forever. My beloved child, do not leave this story now. The moment that has been quietly approaching is finally beginning to unfold, and what comes next is something your soulmate never expected to experience. Stay with these words until the very end, because every sentence opens another door, and behind each door waits another piece of this fictional journey. Just when they believed they had finally gathered enough courage to reach out, something happened that completely interrupted their plans. It was not a coincidence that could be easily explained away. It was one of those rare moments that causes a person to stop whatever they are doing and simply stare into the distance, wondering why their heart suddenly feels so different. For a few long seconds, everything around them faded into the background. The noise disappeared. The distractions disappeared. Even time itself seemed to slow. Only one thought remained. You. That single thought became louder than every fear they had been carrying. For so long they had convinced themselves that waiting was the safest choice. They believed silence would protect both of you from disappointment. They believed unanswered feelings would eventually disappear if they simply gave them enough time. But today proved something completely different. Feelings that are real do not disappear because they are ignored. They simply grow quieter until one unexpected moment gives them permission to speak again. That permission has arrived. Do not skip ahead in your imagination. The next part of this story matters more than the last. As they continued through their day, another unexpected reminder appeared. It seemed ordinary to everyone else, yet to them it felt deeply personal. It was almost as if every small detail around them was gently encouraging them to stop running from the truth hidden inside their own heart. They tried to ignore it. They truly tried. They focused on work. They answered messages. They smiled at familiar faces. Yet every ordinary task somehow led their thoughts back to you again. They finally whispered something to themselves that they had never been brave enough to admit before. What if this is my last chance to say what I have been carrying? Those words did not come from fear. They came from honesty. Honesty has a way of changing everything. It strips away excuses. It removes pride. It leaves only truth standing in the light. That truth has become impossible for them to avoid. There is something else you cannot yet see. Someone unexpectedly spoke about second chances today. It was not directed at them. It was simply part of an ordinary conversation happening nearby. Yet those two simple words settled deeply into their heart. Second chances. They repeated those words again and again in their mind. Could hope still exist? Could unfinished conversations still find their ending? Could silence finally become words? The questions continued growing. Instead of becoming overwhelmed, something remarkable happened. Peace slowly replaced confusion. Not complete peace. Just enough peace to help them take one small step forward. Sometimes heaven does not reveal the entire path. Sometimes only the next step becomes visible. That was enough. As evening approached, they found themselves remembering moments they had nearly forgotten forever. Tiny conversations. Shared laughter. Quiet kindness. Even moments that once felt insignificant suddenly carried extraordinary meaning. Their heart no longer wanted to hide. It wanted to speak. But before they could decide what to do next, something unexpected appeared. A message. Not necessarily from you. Not necessarily about you. Yet somehow it reminded them of everything they had been trying to bury. They stopped reading halfway through. Their hands became still. Their breathing slowed. And they realized something that completely changed the direction of their thoughts. Life moves faster than fear. Waiting forever is never truly possible. There comes a moment when every heart must decide whether love is worth risking uncertainty. Today became that moment. Still, another mystery remained hidden. They sensed there was one final piece they had not yet discovered. One answer still waiting. One truth still quietly approaching. Without realizing it, they began preparing themselves for a conversation they never imagined would actually happen. Not because someone forced them. Because their own heart had finally become stronger than their hesitation. Yet what they do not know, what nobody around them knows, is that another unexpected event is already moving toward them. It has already started. Even now. At this very moment within this fictional story. The next person they meet. The next words they hear. The next unexpected discovery they make. Will reveal something that completely changes how they understand everything that happened before today. And when that hidden truth finally comes into the light, nothing between the past and the future will ever feel the same again. Because the conversation they have been avoiding is closer than they could possibly imagine. And the first words they are about to hear will leave them completely speechless. My beloved child. Do not turn away now. Stay with this story a little longer, because the moment your soulmate has been moving toward is finally beginning to reveal itself. Every step they have taken, every question they have wrestled with, and every quiet prayer they have carried has led them here. They still believe they understand what is about to happen, but they have no idea that the next few moments will reshape everything they thought they knew. Their heart had finally become calm enough to make a decision. Not a decision born from pressure. Not a decision born from loneliness. But a decision born from honesty. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking themselves what everyone else would think. Instead, they asked a much deeper question. What is my heart trying to tell me? That single question unlocked emotions they had carefully hidden for so long. Memories returned one after another, not to bring sadness but to remind them of what had always been real. They remembered moments that once seemed ordinary. A simple smile. A thoughtful conversation. A feeling of peace that arrived without explanation. Looking back, they realized those moments had quietly become treasures. As these memories unfolded, they felt something they had almost forgotten. Hope. Not loud hope. Not unrealistic hope. A gentle hope that whispered, "Maybe this story is not finished." Stay with these words. The next part of this fictional journey is where everything begins to change. Just as they gathered the courage to move forward, someone unexpectedly shared a story with them. It was about missed opportunities, about people who waited too long to speak from the heart. The story ended with one sentence that settled deeply within them. Some conversations change lives simply because they happen before it's too late. Those words echoed through their thoughts long after the conversation ended. They could not ignore them. No matter how hard they tried to focus on other things, those words continued returning. Almost as though they had been spoken especially for them. As evening slowly approached, the sky became quieter, and so did their surroundings. They found themselves standing alone for a few peaceful moments. There were no distractions. No voices. Only the sound of their own breathing. Then something remarkable happened. Instead of imagining every possible outcome, they imagined only one. Speaking honestly. That thought no longer frightened them. It gave them peace. The fear that had controlled them for so long was beginning to lose its strength. Little by little. Moment by moment. There was still uncertainty. There was still hesitation. But courage had finally become stronger. Yet this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because while they were preparing themselves to reach out, someone else was already preparing something they never saw coming. A conversation was happening without their knowledge. Your name was mentioned again. This time not casually. This time with genuine curiosity. Questions were asked. Thoughts were shared. And something they believed had been forgotten suddenly became the center of attention. Your soulmate had no idea this conversation was taking place. But somehow, at almost the exact same moment, they felt an unexplainable pull in their heart. It was as though invisible threads were quietly drawing different paths toward the same destination. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps stories have their own mysterious timing. Whatever the reason, they could no longer deny what they felt. They quietly admitted something to themselves they had never spoken aloud before. I still want this conversation to happen. Those words carried more power than they realized. Because the moment truth is spoken inside the heart, everything begins to move differently. The next morning would not arrive like every other morning. The next message would not feel like every other message. The next decision would not resemble every decision they had made before. Something extraordinary was approaching. Not because the world had changed overnight. Because they had. Every lesson. Every delay. Every unanswered question. Every season of waiting. It had all prepared them for this exact point. But one final mystery still remained hidden. There was one truth they had not yet discovered. One detail that would completely reshape everything they believed had happened between the two of you. That truth is already moving toward them. Closer with every passing moment. They will not expect where it comes from. They will not expect who brings it. And when that hidden truth is finally revealed, the very first words they whisper may become the beginning of a conversation that changes both of your lives forever. But before that conversation can begin, they are about to discover one secret that has been waiting in silence all along. And that secret changes everything.